This time I'd like to call to order the Monday, September 16th, 2013 meeting of the Currituck County Board of Commissioners. At 6 o'clock we had a work session to discuss and review multifamily provisions and allowances within the Unified Development Ordinance. At this time we're going to ask Reverend Ricky Bishop to lead us in our invocation and then to lead us in the Pledge of Allegiance. Please stand.
Let's pray. Father, we've been reminded again today on the news of the complexity of society. It created us with this paradox where we need community and we need each other, while at the same time some of our greatest problems come from that, and we just acknowledge that. And we thank you for these leaders that, God, take their time to work for peace and for the unity and the prosperity of our community. Thank you for the wonderful people that make it up. And I pray for wisdom, grace, be shed on our leaders as well as this community. May we always work, of course, as we do, for our own personal prosperity and rights, while at the same time being conscious of the rights and the prosperity of others as being important. And so just pray that grace and that wisdom be in this place tonight and all that takes place in Jesus' name. Amen.
Amen.
I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Thank you, Pastor Bishop. This time the agenda has one deletion and the consent agenda item 5. And the one addition is a resolution recognizing the Shawboro Ruritan Club's, what year, 65th anniversary.
So moved, Mr. Chairman.
Have a motion? Second. All in favor, aye.
Aye.
Opposed, like sign. Motion carries. Next on the agenda is public comment. First, we have Miss Mary Etheridge.
Good evening. My name is Mary Etheridge, and I live at 846 Shawboro Road. My family and I have been involved in litigation with Currituck County since 2011 over illegal spot zoning in our neighborhood. On December the 5th, 2011, a motion was made by Owen Etheridge to allow a junkyard to be located on 1.1 acres of land within 600 feet of my home and surrounded by our farmland. This motion was seconded by Chairman O'Neill. At that time, Mr. Ben Woody, the planning director, informed the commissioners that the TRC, the planning staff, and the planning board did not recommend approval. At the meeting, the commissioners were also given a letter from the North Carolina Department of Cultural Resources wishing to voice their opposition, along with a letter from the sheriff with her concerns. The county's own attorney informed the board that it was illegal spot zoning, and all the neighbors who actually lived in the neighborhood also spoke against a junkyard. At this time, I would like to play a video from the commissioners' last meeting on September the 3rd.
You can get the votes. The staff has recommended approval, the planning board's recommended approval, TRC's recommended approval, and they cannot go forward without the permits. There's a time element of money for someone to bring stuff forward to the Board of Commissioners, and if they meet the requirements, then they certainly have a right for an affirmative vote. So I will not vote to continue it.
I want to make sure I have this right. So if someone meets all the requirements, they certainly have the right for an affirmative vote. But if they meet none of the requirements, thank you.
Thank you. I didn't realize how big my forehead was getting until then. Next, we have Miss Ellen Owens. And Miss Ellen,
Yes.
I believe you've got the 4-H Government is Us program,
Yes, sir.
and you have some of our highlights of the county that you're going to share with us tonight.
I do. Just wanted to tell you, we started the program tonight, and I have 5 4-Hers who are signed up. One of them couldn't be here at the first meeting, but these young folks are going to meet so that we can talk about how they, as adults, can get the skills necessary to be good, active citizens when they become adults. And real important in the 4-H program to do that. So I'm going to let them introduce themselves and just tell you who they are, and I'm putting them on the spot. So.
I'm Mitch Kreisel.
I'm Victoria Roby.
I'm Abby Rippin.
I'm Jamie Hauser.
And I am Latoria Moore, and I'm obviously not a student. I'm helping Miss Owens with this program.
Just to tell you guys a little bit about what they'll be doing, they have 5 meetings. They will be actually talking about issues that are relative to them and learning how to write petitions or policy briefs, and they will be coming back to you after they have done that to present in front of the board. So they'll actually be speaking to you again. So thank you guys very much for having us. We have one more thing. We are offering a program called The Side Effects of Drugs, and the Sheriff's Department is helping with that. We have a big need to educate our young people about drugs in our society. Just wanted to let people know about this. It's on September the 25th at 7 p.m. at the Extension Office. It's open to anyone. You can just call the Extension Office at 232-2262 to register, or you can contact Latoria Moore at our office and talk with her. So we just want to make people aware of that, the side effects of drugs.
Well,
Thank you.
Before you all sit down, I know some of the commissioners want to say a few things.
Sure.
Because we're really proud of what the 4-H does with our young folks. They create leaders for tomorrow. You all are teaching them a wealth of life skills that sometimes they may not get somewhere else. So we're very appreciative of what you do with these young folks, and we're appreciative of the young folks who become old folks like us, and someday you'll be our leaders. So we appreciate you taking the time to invest in this type of stuff, and let some of the other board members speak.
I would like to tell everyone that Ellen heads up the Backpack for Kids program. And don't be shy.
I'm not sure.
She heads up the program, and this is a program that she's starting to work with kids in elementary school, not just high school. And Backpack for Kids feeds elementary school kids that go home hungry on Friday. They don't get anything to eat till Monday. And Ellen heads up that program. What was the number, 232-2262?
Yes, sir.
And they're taking contributions for Backpack for Kids. So call Ellen. It's a great program.
Thank you. Thank you very much.
Thank you. If y'all need assistance from any of the staff and your projects or whatever, Dan or Mr. Scanlon and Mr. McCree and Miss Gilbert, Mr. Woody, anyone that you need will be more than happy to help.
And any commissioner, right?
Yeah, and us too. Next, we have Miss Teresa McPherson.
Good evening. I'm Teresa McPherson. I live at 117 Evans Drive in Grandy. I'm here this evening, as most of you know. I've been president with Walnut Island Property Owners Association for the past 2.5 years. And I am here to express my gratitude to you as a board and to all of the staff for the amazing support that I and the association have received over these past 2.5 years. It has meant a great deal to me, and it has been a great pleasure to work with you. I am no longer president, but Mr. Woody has just passed around a newsletter to you. It is my last piece of work that I'd like for you to read through, and I hope that you will continue to support Walnut Island in the way that you have in the past, because it has made a tremendous difference in our community. And I love our community, and I have great hopes for it. So thank you so much. Oh, and I would like to add, if I may, not being president any actions that are taken going forward, they are not by my decision or agreement. So please be aware of that. Thank you.
Thank you, Ms. McPherson, and you've done a wonderful job of working with staff to make Walnut Island a better place as well.
Thank you.
And we appreciate it.
Thank you very much.
That's all I had signed up to speak during public comments. Is there anyone who didn't get a chance that wishes to speak? Any commissioners? Hearing none, I'll close the public comment. Were you getting ready? No, I'll close the public comments, and we'll move into the public hearings. The first one is item A, public hearing and action PB 08-45, Estates at Corova Beach, request to amend the preliminary plat special use permit approval to remove parcel 087A-000-000D-0005, 2.1 acres from open space, Corova Beach subdivision, section 5, Fruitville Township. Mr. Woody, is this also a special use permit?
Yes.
How about the next item? Is that also? That is not. So anyone that wishes to speak in favor of or in opposition to this agenda item needs to come forward now and be sworn in. I ask you to place your left hand on the Bible and raise your right hand. You swear to tell the truth, the whole truth, and nothing but the truth, so help you God.
I do.
Thank you. Mr. Woody.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. This is a request for the amended preliminary plat use permit. I'm going to kind of get right into it, actually. Corova Beach subdivision is a subdivision in the off-road area of the Currituck Outer Banks. It was approved through the course of 1966 and 1967. And of course, at that time, the county did not require paved roads or the installation of infrastructure or any of that kind of stuff. So that's kind of how you see what you see out there today. Fast forward many years, and in 2008, the Board of Commissioners approved a sketch plan for sections 1, 3, and 5 of Corova Beach subdivision to basically convert those sections into additional residential lots. Part of what happened in that approval process was the lots that were created in those sections were moved towards the ocean front, and then open space or contiguous sections of open space were established closer to the sound in the rear of those sections. Again, in 2009, that preliminary plat came before the Board of Commissioners in September, and it was approved. And in October of 2012, they came to you and asked for a permit extension. So you've seen this subdivision a couple of times in the past. And in the 2009 approval, basically what it did is it took 20 existing lots, and through recombinations and the division of land, it created 28 new lots. These 28 lots were spread across took 20 lots and replatted them to 28 lots. So it was 8 new lots. I should clarify that. And it spread those across 3 sections of Corova Beach. It's a total of 73 acres. In that 73 acres, they offered to dedicate 27.5 acres of open space. That dedication was above and beyond what the minimum requirement was. And what they're here tonight before you to request is that the preliminary plat be amended to reduce the open space dedication by 0.96 of an acre, so a little less than an acre, and adding fire ponds that were required, adding those into the open space as well. So the net of that is, the residual is that basically they are all said and done, they still have the 28 lots that have been replatted, and they're offering or creating 26.54 acres of open space. So remember I told you a minute ago in 2009, we had 27.5 acres of open space. This amended preliminary plat establishes 26.5 acres of open space, but still meets the minimum requirements. So let me show you this is section 1. This is the section closest to the state line, and again you can see the cross-hatched areas in the rear of the section. That's the open space, and towards the front you can see the lots that were created. Let's go to section 2, the middle section. Again, you see the open space that's created to the rear to the left side of the page, and the lots towards the front, towards the ocean side. And then finally, and there's a good example, you can't see that well, but down in the lower left-hand corner, you can see the fire pond that's included in open space. And as you know, Corova doesn't have municipal water system, so they have to use fire ponds and dry hydrants and things to help fight fires over there. And finally, Section 5, and basically what you can see is, I've highlighted it in red, that's the piece of Section 5 that would no longer be open space. Originally, that 2-acre piece, approximately 2-acre piece, was open space. They're proposing to remove that from open space, but again, that being done, they still meet the minimum requirements. So let me go through this real quickly, just for the record. So Section 1 is required to have 10.93 acres of open space. Section 1 is dedicating 11.95 acres of open space. Section 2 is required to have 8.38 acres of open space, and they're dedicating 9.16 acres of open space. And Section 5 is required to have 6.29 acres of open space, and they're dedicating 5.44 acres. So collectively, they're providing open space as required, but I'll note individually Section 5 is deficient in open space, so as part of your findings tonight, you'll have to make 2 findings related to that. And you can do that. Basically, they're moving more of the open space to Sections 1 and 2 and less of it in Section 5. But the ordinance does give you the ability to do that, provided you make 2 additional findings, which are in your staff report. The TRC has reviewed this request and provided you make the findings for the creation of the open space, the transfer. Staff does recommend approval. There's a number of conditions that were included in the 2009 use permit, 16 as a matter of fact, and we would recommend those conditions remain with the use permit. Now, I'll note, I'm kind of jumping ahead a little bit, but part of this too is our next item relates to the dedication of the open space. So I'm not going to cover that in this presentation, but I can in the next presentation. So at this time, I can answer any questions you have.
Any questions of Mr. Woody? Mr. Idlett?
Yeah, Mr. Woody, didn't staff allow this to come forward as one particular package?
We did. We did.
So collectively, the open space does meet the requirement of the UDO, correct?
It does.
Thank you.
Anyone else? Hearing none, I'm going to open the public hearing. I believe we have Mr. Bissell, Robert Hobbs, and Larry Riggs. Does anyone want to ask them any questions, or do you want to make any public comments?
Let me just make a couple of comments. And I think we've got a very nice subdivision up here. It's been a long time coming. The developer has worked hard to make it something that Currituck County could be proud of. The construction was done to a high standard. Everything has been signed off and ready for approval. We have we during the process realized that collectively we had about 3 acres of excess open space, and have worked with staff over the past few months to find the best way to resolve the situation. And I think what you have before you tonight is the best way to do that. We do have some color slides here that will help clarify a little bit. If you back up to section 1. That just shows you kind of an overview of that section. The area that is in tan shows the proposed lots, which there are 11. The area in light green is the wetland area. The olive green is a buffer, and the kind of medium green is the unbuffered areas. But all of the light green and darker green areas are those areas that would be offered for dedication to the county for public use. If we go to a similar one in section 2, again, the color code is the same. The green areas would, except for the wetlands within the lots, the green areas would be offered for dedication to Currituck County as open space that could be used for public use as determined by the county.
There are 8 lots there and 9.16 acres of open space. And then in section 5, the light gray area is the tract for the parcel where the current fire station is. So additional open space would be dedicated around the fire station and across the street from it, totaling about a little under 5.5 acres of additional open space there, and the parcel that is in dark brown would become an additional building site. And that pretty well summarizes it. We've got a total, as Mr. Woody said, of 26.54 acres of open space, which exceeds the UDO requirement by just under an acre, a little bit less than an acre more than what's required. And I should also point out that the majority of that is upland. Within the open space areas, altogether 87% is upland.
Anyone have any questions for Mr. Bissell?
Questions, just a comment.
Yes, sir.
I've watched this project since they began. I'm impressed with what they've done. They've done a good job. Mr. Riggs has put in 2 fire ponds up there that were badly needed, one in section 1 and one in section, 2 and 3, right there on kind of the line. There's dry hydrants have been put in there, pipes out there. Really is going to improve the fire capability there. They've done a lot of road work. They've reestablished boundaries. They've reestablished access points going across the dunes to the oceans. Done a good job in everything that they've done. And with that, unless someone else has a comment, I'm ready to make a motion.
Let me close the public hearing.
Okay, thank you.
Now we'll take a motion.
Mr. Chairman, I move to approve PB 0845 as presented with staff findings and recommendations included in the case analysis. I'll also ask Mr. Bissell to, if they would, look at repairing, if possible, a culvert on Red Snapper that was alleged to have been damaged during the sand hauling operations from the pond. Don't know whether it was or wasn't, but anyhow, that was the allegations that neighbors made. And also 2 additional findings for Section 5. That, number 1, the objective for all required open space set-asides are met collectively in all 3 sections, and the open space configuration as proposed provides for the reasonable development of the subdivision by clustering lots and providing contiguous open space set-asides in each section.
I second that motion.
We'll second. Any further questions? Hearing none, all those in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Motion carries. Item B, consideration and action of PB 08-45, Estates at Corova Beach, and offer of dedication of certain open space parcels as shown on Estates at Corova Beach Final Plat, Sections 1, 2, and 5, Fruitville Township. Would that be Mr. McCree or Mr. Woody, or both?
I'm going to start it off, and I'm going to quickly turn it over to Mr. McCree. Based on the amended preliminary plat that was just approved, the Estates at Corova Beach has 26.54 acres of open space. The developer has stated their intent to dedicate the open space to Currituck County for public use. They've basically expressed that really since the beginning of this. So it's here before you tonight. The ordinance requires that the Board of Commissioners accept any dedication for open space. If it comes back to you for that final decision. I will note real quickly that initially the developer proposed a set of deed restrictions for the use of the open space. The county attorney, Mr. McCree, has worked with the developer's attorney to kind of work through some of the issues on that. I noted in the staff report that he would make a presentation on that, and I'm going to turn it over to Ike for that portion of it.
All right, Mr. McCree.
Mr. Chairman, I placed before you a copy of the proposed deed in which there are some conditions on with regard to the use of the open space that is offered for dedication to the county. I would point your attention to page 3, and there are, I guess, two areas within the open space. And of course, you see on one of the slides up on the screen, the dark green, as Mr. Bissell presented, is conservation buffer area designation, and then I guess the blue-green is I guess we call the remainder of the open space. So, for purposes of this deed and the certain restrictions, on page 3, item number 1, conservation buffer areas, the county would be restricted to use of those areas because the intent, of course, is to buffer the public's use from private residential lots that will be developed and built upon, but would allow for the county to use those areas for undeveloped and unimproved public open space, public parks, underground utilities, and/or underground and above-ground stormwater facilities. We certainly push for that because, as we know, we have some stormwater issues in that area, and the more property and more facilities we can put in place, perhaps the better we can control the stormwater issues there. For the remainder of the open space, item 2 lists those types of uses that the county can make of those areas: undeveloped and unimproved public open space, public parks, and/or improved property for governmental purposes. And then if you go down to the next section, 3 lists those types of things that would be considered governmental purposes in those remaining areas of the open space, which includes county governmental office building, county law enforcement building, fire station, public school operated by the Currituck County Board of Education, elevated water tank, telecommunications tower, overhead or underground utilities, and/or stormwater management facilities. We expressed some concern, and the developer responded favorably to the height limitation in that there would be no height restrictions as it relates to elevated water tanks or telecommunications tower. There would be height restrictions as it relates to any other type of structure that the county might construct on the open space properties or put to public use. If you go to page 4, there is a provision, and I will say much improved from an earlier draft, that would provide that if the county would for some reason use the property for purposes not allowed for, as I just listed for you in the deed, then as to that particular parcel whose use, where use is being made contrary to the deed restrictions, then that property would revert back to the developer if that use continues for a period of 60 days. And then just one other point I would note is that the county, of course, will be assuming responsibility for maintenance of the open space properties upon its conveyance to the county. So that would be any kind of ditches and, of course, the 2 fire ponds that have been noted. With that, and with some good back and forth between the county and the developer, I can certainly recommend, at least from a legal perspective, this proposed deed to you and adoption by the Board of Commissioners and acceptance of the dedication.
Yes, sir, Mr. Veteran.
I can't say I'm a new commissioner, but I want to make sure that I understand. We're going to get a deed to this property, so we don't have to worry about down the road changes or amendments or whatever. We're going to get a deed to this piece of property.
That's correct.
Okay.
We may again use the property in accordance with the restrictions that are set forth in the deed.
Okay.
And this is for consideration and action.
That's correct.
So we need a motion.
Mr. Chairman, I move to accept the offer of dedication of certain open space parcels shown in the estates of Corova Beach Final Plat, sections 1, 2, and 5, in the form of a deed as presented.
I second that motion.
A motion, a second. Any further discussion? Hearing none, all those in favor, aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Motion carries. Item C, public hearing and action, PB 13-15, water supply standards, request to amend the Unified Development Ordinance, Chapter 6, required infrastructure, and Chapter 10, definitions and measurements, to revise the water supply standards to exempt certain development from connecting to the county water system. Would that be you, Mr. Woody?
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. This is a text amendment, excuse me, that was submitted by Mr. Eugene White, and it is intended to amend the county's water supply standards to exempt subdivisions located more than 1 mile from the county water system from connecting to the system. And what you can see on that map, and it's very difficult to see on your screen, but there's also a copy in your packet, is essentially the county water system is shown on the map. You can see vaguely you can see the blue lines that represent the water mains that run through the county. And all things being relative, there's fairly good coverage of the water mains in the county. And the inside buffer, the light pink, shows an approximately 1 mile buffer from those water mains. And that's actually a 1 mile buffer from water mains that are 6 inches or greater. And the key with a 6-inch water main is that's really the minimum size you need for fire hydrants and to be able to use the water system for fire protection. So that's an important water main size. But effectively, you can see a vast majority of the county truly is located within 1 mile of the 6-inch water mains. The next buffer, the darker red, is 2 miles, and the final buffer is 3 miles. So you can even see up in the northwest backwoods area of the county, there's even land that's located more than 3 miles from a 6-inch water main. What the county's done in the past for many years is we've required that when a subdivision is proposed, they are subject to a formula. And the formula creates a distance based on the number of lots proposed in the subdivision. And then we take that distance and we see if your subdivision is within that distance from the existing water system. If your subdivision is within that distance, the formula, then you've got to run a water line and connect. So the developers are going to incur the cost of connecting that subdivision to the county's water supply system, which obviously is a good way to grow the county's water supply system. However, in the current ordinance, if you are not within that formula, so let's say that you apply the formula and it isn't of a distance that connects to a county water main, then you have to provide a cash deposit. So effectively, the county then collects a cash payment, which would cover the cost of the water line installation plus 15%, which gives you a little leeway for inflation and things, and the county holds that until such time as the county water system runs by your subdivision, and someday in the future the county can use that deposit we're holding and then install the water mains in the subdivision. That's a pretty good policy, and it's generally similar to what a lot of places do. What made Currituck County unique was that we didn't have any area where we just said, well, this subdivision is just so far from the county water system that practically you're probably never going to use that cash deposit to build water lines. And there's some cash deposits we've been holding for probably close to a decade, and the water lines aren't any closer to those places now than they were probably then. Mr. White is considering a subdivision on his property in the northwest backwoods area of the county, and he kind of asked, well, that seems like a difficult standard. Is there some relief from that? And the answer was no, there's really not, short of proposing a text amendment, which he's done. I think Mr. White understands this applies countywide, so staff's tried to work with him on that amendment to make it a little more reasonable in terms of what's beneficial to the county's water system, but also reasonable to people who are developing land out in the rural areas of the county. And so we met as TRC, the county engineer was included in that, the fire marshal, the utilities director, planners, of course, and we kind of talked about what's the best way to create a connection requirement for the county water system. We looked at other counties in North Carolina. We probably have one of the more ambitious connection policies currently. Most places don't have quite the breadth of theirs as we do. And what we decided was that basically, and then again, you can see it in your packet where we also looked at the cost of running water line, and the county staff agreed with Mr. White generally and felt like that within 1 mile of a 6-inch water line, that's probably a reasonable distance for a developer to provide a connection. When you get out into further areas, 1.5 miles, 2 miles, it probably doesn't make a lot of sense to require this bonding for water line extensions, because the key is that when you're that far away from a water line, when you're more than 1 mile, your property is going to be zoned agricultural, and in that zoning district, you're not going to get much density anyways. And a good example is if you have a 100-acre farm and you're zoned agricultural, your density is going to be probably somewhere between 33 to 40 houses on a 100-acre farm. So it just doesn't drive a lot of density. So we basically went into the water supply standards ordinance. We've created a mechanism to basically say if we still apply the formula is a good formula. The more lots you have, the bigger the formula gets. We said if you're within this mile, we're going to apply the formula, and if it still fits, we're going to make you extend the water line. If you're within the mile, we apply the formula, and it doesn't require the extension, we're still going to make you bond for a period of 3 years, because we feel like a mile distance is something where a water line might actually get extended in a 3-year period. So we're still looking for developer-initiated connections within a mile, but outside of that, we're not looking for that formula, or we're not looking for a bond or anything. That covers that. Hopefully that makes sense. When we were in the section, we also cleaned up some other language in the section, a couple other things I wanted to cover, and I'll do this quickly. We clarified some terminology. Sometimes we found in the ordinance we use different terms interchangeably. We try to define centralized water systems so it's more clear. We removed the requirement for letters of credit. Basically, if you're within the mile, the formula does not apply to you, and you got to give us a cash deposit. We'd rather hold the cash deposit for 3 years, and if it doesn't get to you, the water line, then we're just going to release it, because the county historically has not been good with tracking bonds and letter of credits, and we're probably not particularly good at calling bonds or letter of credit. So we felt like it's better just to have the cash until the time period expires and release the cash. And the last thing is we added a couple of items related to the consistency with the North Carolina Fire Code. I think the applicant's going to speak to that. They may have some differences of opinion on that section particularly, but I'll let him speak to that. After reviewing this, the planning staff and the technical review committee do recommend approval because it is consistent with the land use plan. It focuses water service in our developed areas, including future growth areas. I mean, our water system really is in a good spot in comparison to where our full service areas are on the land use plan. It really kind of fits well together. And then lastly, I'll note the planning board recommended unanimous approval of this request. They took another step forward, so I want to give you kind of a thought process they're having right now. Is in addition to having these extension requirements, the planning board thought that maybe we should consider what's called a reimbursement agreement. I'm not going to get into that deeply, but just to tell you they're working on that as a complement to this ordinance. And that means basically if a developer had to install a water line in the next 5 or 10 years, whatever that period is, if another subdivision hooks onto that water line, then a portion of their cost would go back to the original developer. That's a good ordinance because that helps grow your water system. It makes developers probably more likely to invest in water system growth. But that's kind of a part B to this, and that'll come back in the next month or two. And that concludes my presentation.
Any questions of Mr. Woody? Yes, sir, Mr. Petrie.
Make sure I understand that we're taking cash deposits. We're not doing a bond, where we discussed this, I think, last year sometime, and a bond was considered. But now we're going back to the cash deposits, but we're only going to hold them for 3 years.
And we did discuss this last year, and the amendment last year still required that a cash deposit be made for 3 years. After 3 years, it let it convert to a letter of credit or bond. So what we're saying is after 3 years, let's just refund the cash and move on.
But you just said a minute ago we're holding deposits that are a decade old.
We were, but now they're letters of credit that we're holding.
Okay, that's fine.
Yeah.
So we've moved past
that. But this would actually, would allow those letters of credit to be released too, this amendment.
All right, my second question is, if a developer comes in, somebody builds a home, we don't have county water to his home, he puts in a well, and then the county water does come to his home, he's not required to hook up. He can still stay on his well.
He can still stay on his well.
Thank you.
Anyone else?
Yeah,
Yes, sir.
Kind of confused me a little bit, Ben. Is the money that for water lines held today to pay to run water lines to the site or to provide the infrastructure within the development at a later date?
Within the development, when the county water main is eventually extended by that site. So if you had a subdivision off Puddin Ridge Road, for example, and we're holding $100,000, when a water main comes by that subdivision, we would then use that money to install water mains in the subdivision.
Okay, I will just, everybody here has not had the pleasure yet to read over this assessment. I have. One of the recommendations they're making in this assessment is a more aggressive fire hydrant campaign throughout the county. So that kind of plays along in this. And of course, all it is a recommendation, but just to let everyone know that. Thank you.
Anyone else? Mr. Woody, I have a question. Let's say, this hypothetical, but let's say somebody starts wanting to rezone some tracts of land out in the hitherlands, and then suddenly they really should be hooking up to the water system, especially out in the Moyock area. You've got poor soils, poor water. We all remember the episode with the lady in her well, the health department and everything. How will we address that? You said 100-acre tract. Let's say somebody wants to rezone a 100-acre tract that is 2 miles out. They'd be exempt, correct? So what is it, a mile?
It's a mile, so say 2 miles, yeah.
Well, let's just say it's 1.2 miles out. They want to do a 100-acre subdivision, and they come in for a rezoning that would allow them to put 80, 90 homes on that 100, if that's possible or whatever. How are we going to treat that when there really should be a requirement to get the water out there?
There's two options I see. The immediate option is to deny the rezoning because of the lack of infrastructure, which is probably what your staff would recommend. The second option is
Doesn't mean we'll follow it.
That's true. A second option is, as a condition of that zoning approval, is require the subdivision to be served by potable water, by the water. I mean, you can require that connection as a condition.
In the
of
special
zoning.
use permit, we could do that.
I mean, in the zoning.
In the
zoning action, you can make a
If there was a
condition.
rezoning, make that a condition of
You
the
have to have a public
rezoning.
water
Okay.
supply. Yeah.
And back to my concern simply is this: 3 years down the road, and then all of a sudden we get an aggressive water main campaign in the county and start doing some things and running mains and this and that and other. Well, then when it comes to fire protection within these subdivisions that's already been developed, then the onus is going to fall on the county then to provide the infrastructure within that subdivision, the cost. Correct? After that 3-year period.
Yeah, if a subdivision is approved and it exists and 3 years passes and
Bets are off. Then
what water line gets out there 4 years, 5 years later, then yeah, at that point it's a either the HOA would have to provide the water infrastructure, which probably isn't realistic, or the county would.
I mean, to me, the potable water is not the big issue. The fire flow water is, with my background, that's my issue.
But it's 6 inch big enough.
No, it's not. Certainly not.
Did you hear my question?
I did, but generally 6 inch. I mean, sometimes the county requires upsizing of lines based on the size of the development. We just did that with Baxter Lane, for example. But generally 6 inches can carry the flow for a fire hydrant.
When you get looking at 4,500 fire flow, GPM for fire flow that's been calculated in its assessment, 6 inches don't touch it, my friend. Not touch it. Close. 10 inches might.
I guess, Mr. Woody, I'd like to clarify something. The Board of Commissioners is not required to follow the staff's recommendation on a rezoning, are they?
No, sir.
I just want to clarify that for the record.
6 inches is like.
Anyone else have any other questions? I'm going to open the public hearing. I didn't have anybody signed up for it. I guess, Mr. Hyman, you wish to speak? Please come forward and identify yourself for the record.
My name's Eddie Hyman. I'm here to speak on this. I'm representing Mr. White, who brought the text amendment forward. I wanted to touch on several topics here, or several things. Ben mentioned, the way it is now, any major subdivision, even if water's not available, if you're outside of the formula to extend water lines, you still have to pay. You have to calculate that formula and figure out what that. And that would cover the extension of the water line on the public road to the site, and then all the infrastructure within the subdivision, plus 15%, plus the water tap fees per lot at final plat recording. And that money just goes into an account. Now, if the county has no plans for any long-term extension or a long-term plan of any kind of water expansion, the developers, and it can get into the hundreds of thousands of dollars. That's a check that they write and they never see again. Then they have to pay for the wells, water softeners, and the other, to supply water to the subdivision. And in areas, in the outlying areas, and we've taken a mile as our limit. If you're within the mile, you go ahead and put up this same bond, but it's only 3 years. It's not permanent. It's not money gone for however or whenever it could be used. But developments that are outside of the mile, just relieve them of the requirement to do that, because most of these outlying areas are areas that are not, through the land use plan, you've designated where you want your growth. And that's where, you mentioned rezoning earlier, where we go into an area and ask for rezoning in one of these outlying areas. If it's not consistent with the land use plan, it's not going to get support. and more than likely will not make it past your review. But I think it's a good idea to, like what Ben has proposed, if it hasn't been initiated or acted on within 3 years, to give the money back, or at least have a time limit on it. Right now, it's perpetual, or you keep the money, and then the developer has to make his own infrastructure improvements, wells and things of that nature. So that's why we think it's a good idea. It'll also free up some money where the county is holding some money from developers that will loosen up maybe a little bit more development within the county. I did want to, so I feel like it's a good idea that on these outlying counties where water is not available, not ever planned or proposed to be available, not even want to make it available, I think it's unfair to make the developer, subdivider, put up that much money for infrastructure and not ever have to use it, or not ever it be used. In the text amendment, I didn't notice this at our last meeting. They've changed right now, subdivisions of 20 lots or more are required to provide fire protection. If we're on a water system, you've got to place fire hydrants in there. If you're outside of the area like we're talking about, you have to dig a pond or provide a water supply, and typically it's a pond that meets the criteria that the pond will have water sufficient for firefighting during a 50-year drought. So we have to do calculations. And that's for 20 lots or over in major subdivisions. What you had before you makes that requirement for all residential lots, all residential subdivisions of 2 lots or more. And that would impact greatly any minor subdivision that would come forward. They would have to install a pond that we would have to certify through a hydrologist that would be sufficient to supply fire flow in a 50-year drought. I'd like to see that change to exempt minor subdivisions. Minor subdivisions have been put on the books to allow people to generate some income on a minor basis, up to 5 lots, and be able to sell property or give property to their children. The way this is written, if you're doing 2 lots, you've got to have fire flow, no matter where you are. And believe me, I'm a fireman, was a fireman for 15 years, paid and volunteer, and I know the importance of the firefighting capabilities. Most of the rural departments have quick dump tankers and can supply enough fire flow to handle a single or a single family residence. So I feel like going from 20 lots for the fire flow protection to 2 lots is an enormous burden on the minor subdivisions, which would basically, I think, probably eliminate most minor subdivisions as they would come forward. I'd like to see that part of this text amendment get changed to 6 lots or exempt, either 6 lots or exempt minor subdivisions from this part of the ordinance.
Eddie, I don't want to interrupt you while you're on a roll, but I need to ask you a question.
Okay.
Now, I understand with the farmer or the mom or dad who wants to give their children a lot or whatever, but aren't typically most of the major subdivisions, they come in and plot out those 5 lots, then they come in and bring the other 90 that go around it.
Mm-hmm.
So, I mean, the minor subdivision is being used as a way to get around sometimes too.
Well, it is, but it's in the ordinance.
I understand, but what you're saying is at the time they trigger to the 6th lot, they would then have to fulfill the requirements and include the first 5 lots as well, or would you say they just had to do for the other 90?
Well, if fire protection is available that close to the 5 lots, it would affect the first 5.
I ask you, Mr. Woody, is that not something, if they're going to do 5 lots, when they trip to the 6th, shouldn't they have to include those 5 and whatever the requirements are for the others?
I know Eddie probably doesn't agree with me on this, but staff feels like, and we have for a while, that I'm just going to say it, that developers use the minor subdivision as a way to circumvent other parts of the subdivision. So I actually agree with you that if a developer is doing a minor as a first step towards additional lots, I think those minor lots should get incorporated into not just fire protection, but open space dedication, fee in lieu of whatever else is out there. So so far we've, based on an interpretation of the ordinance, we've allowed the minors to kind of be used that way. But
I guess what I'm saying is, if it's truly just a 5-lot subdivision, then I can understand what you're saying. But when it's just used to start the big 100-lot subdivision, when you trip that 6th lot, those other 5 should be included in the requirements that the rest of them are included in.
Well, we've struggled with this for years, and Ben and I have had numerous conversations with planning staff. And here's my take on it. We have a parent tract rule right now. All the tracts as they exist are allowed the minor subdivisions first, and then from there, once the minors are done, they revert to the major requirements. And up in the old ordinance, you had lot thresholds. Doesn't matter who owns them. So I do a 4-lot or 5-lot minor, and 10 years from now, I sell it to Paul, and you want to do one more lot. That's going to, as the way it was interpreted once upon a time, you would be required to be responsible for the open space of the first 4 lots that I cut out. You would be required for the fee in lieu of recreation, or it was trying to lean into be interpreted that way. You'd be required for the open space anyway. So after a lot of discussion, a lot of consideration, I think the final ruling as it is to now is the first 5 lots has been created as a minor, whether it was done 10 years ago or last week. That horse is gone, the barn door's shut. You can't come back now and grab open space from it. You can't grab fee in lieu of it from it. That person exercised their right as an owner to do a minor subdivision. From 6 lots on, it's meet every requirement in the ordinance, the sidewalks, the lighting, the open space. But don't keep going back. 10 years ago, you cut out 4 lots. Well, now when you want to do the 5th one, either if it's you or the second owner, the third owner, an heir to the owner, is going to be responsible for those actions when those actions were perfectly fine as a minor. I think it's, and actually right now, the way it's written, they're done, they're gone. Deal with the major subdivision as a major subdivision, and that's the way it's written now. And I don't know if I've answered your question, but that's the way we're interpreting it. And part of why we did that is we were coming up with subdivisions where a parent parcel, and I know I'm running late and everybody wants to go home.
Take your time.
You could do 19 lots with no open space. And then when you hit 20 lots, you had to go 20% open space of the parent tract. There was instances around where a guy wanted to add 1 lot. He only had 20 acres left out of this parcel. He wanted to cut out 1 lot, but was because it crossed that threshold, that 1 lot required 40 acres of open space from the parent tract. And there was no way that man could cut a lot out.
Well, okay.
But
what a tangled web we weave. And
right.
This really is kind of getting off from the water. I just
was
talking about the water requirement as we go into, and Mr. Woody can advise us about this later.
Well, and here's what this second part of the ordinance is, the requiring water fire protection for 2 lots is 2 residential lots. You're going to have a pond to cover that. Now and I feel like that's a burden on anyone that tries to cut out a minor. The major requirements, yes, 6 lots or more, I can understand it, because that's the guy that's really going in for he's going in it as a business endeavor, and he's got to weigh out the cost. But most of the time, the first 2 or 3 lots, 4 lots as a minor, you've got a lot of your landowners that want to do that also and not do anymore. But thank you for hearing me.
Thank you. Mr. Hyman was the only one we had signed up for public hearing. Is there anyone else? Hearing none, I'll close the public hearing and ask the board. What's your pleasure?
Mr. Chairman, just a comment, listening to Mr. Hyman there and everything, And what we have here is that you have people who take advantage, of the UDO, and they do what they can, and 10 years down the line, someone else is stuck with some of those problems where someone has reaped the profit from it. And I don't know that, that's fair. And we looked at minor subdivisions, and, they're there to provide opportunity. But again, it seems that the UDO is taken advantage of. And when we try to restrict that, we also step on the toes of people with the rights to develop the property. And it's a real line that we walk on. And the same thing about fire protection. Everybody deserves it. Everybody needs it. If your house is on fire and there is not a source of water, it's a tragic thing to see. I saw it on Bell's Island several years ago, and we didn't have fire hydrants, and they finally, were trying to get the water from the canal, and they couldn't do that, and the trucks were bringing water just as fast as they could, and so I think we're trying to do diligence for the people that we don't know yet who are going to build those homes out there. And that's, just my feeling on that. And my side of it, if you would, as far as, looking for the common good in the long run. I don't know if we have a real grasp on it. I don't know that perhaps we shouldn't discuss it and look at it in more depth before we do anything with this. I don't know that I feel like I'd like to make a motion to continue this till we can think about this a little bit more.
I'll second that motion.
Yeah.
Okay, we have a motion and a second.
Do you have any discussion?
More comment?
Discussion?
Yes, sir.
Mr. Scanlon, I guess, or Mr. Woody, you can answer this question. The extension cost pays for the infrastructure, but that does not cover the tap fee, and I think that's what, $6,000?
That's correct.
Thank you.
Any further discussion?
I would just like to say that I understand Mr. Hyman's comments, and he's right. There is quite a bit of an expense there, but I think we don't need to throw the baby out with the bathwater. There's still some merit to some of this, and I think we just, as Mr. Martin said, I agree with his continuance. Give us the opportunity to kind of vet through it and figure out what we don't need to do, but what we do need to do, being responsible to take care of the fire protection for our citizens in our community as well. So.
Mm-hmm. Well, I
agree.
think one last thing, if we're going to continue this for discussion, I think Mr. Hyman's suggestions should be vetted.
I
Also.
agree. Yeah.
That'd be part of what we do.
I agree with
I
that,
have a
too.
question for the county manager. You're the one that's got to keep this water system viable and make the payments. Do you have any thoughts or comments, or would you like to reserve them for the next, after you see what the reiteration may be?
I'll reserve them until we bring something back to you.
Okay, thank you. We have a motion, second. Closed discussion. All those in favor, aye.
Aye.
Opposed, like sign. Motion carries. Next item, D, public hearing and action, PB 13-18, Currituck County request to amend the Unified Development Ordinance, Chapter 3, Zoning Districts, Chapter 4, Use Standards, Chapter 5, Development Standards, Chapter 6, Subdivision and Infrastructure Standards, Chapter 7, Environmental Protection Standards, Chapter 10, Definitions and Measurement to clarify and revise miscellaneous sections of the Unified Development Ordinance. Can you read that back to me 3 times fast?
Wait till I read the amendment.
Mr. Woody.
So this is what the staff internally just calls this a housekeeping amendment, and about once every once every year, 7-8 months, we try to, as we use the ordinance, we keep a list of things that don't appear to work right or may not appear to work in the manner in which they were intended to work. Housekeeping. And when I first got a job here, I was always told, well, if you know there's a problem with the ordinance, then bring it to us, because how do we know to fix it if we don't know what's the problem? So we've been trying to do that, and we have a new ordinance, and as we use it, obviously we're finding things that need to be tweaked. It's hard to rewrite a whole ordinance and make it perfect. But this is just a list of things we've kind of are proactively bringing to you for your consideration. Most of them are really minor fixes and just fixing wording. But I'm going to go through it, and I know everybody wants to go home, but I'm going to do it because I think it's important that you guys understand what's being adopted.
Absolutely.
So let's start with item 1. These first 5 are signage. We are definitely not changing any quantitative sign standards. That's a battle we don't want to have. But item 1 is the home occupation signs. If you have a home business, you can have a 4 square foot sign. It's been that way for a long time. One part of our ordinance says 6 square feet. That's not correct, so we're changing it back to the 4, the way it's been. Item 2 clarifies that when you have 160 feet or more of road frontage, you can actually have a bigger sign, which is no change, just making the ordinance read that way. So bigger road frontages get bigger signs, which makes sense. But one important thing that we actually forgot to add to this, and this board should remember this because you added this, was the requirement that freestanding signs be landscaped. If you remember when we did this sign ordinance, we talked about landscaping around the base of signs. Well, we forgot to put that in the new ordinance. So we're adding that back in for freestanding signs and for shopping center signs. That's just a clarification of something that was in the previous ordinance. Item 4, prohibited signs. We say, or the county prohibits off-premise advertising or billboards, but we don't prohibit all off-premise signs because we do allow off-premise signs, directional signs for churches and cultural uses, and we also allow off-premise signs for farm markets and for special events. So we went ahead and just added off-premise signs prohibited except as otherwise provided. So there are a couple of instances in which you can have an off-premise sign. Item 5, one of those being special event signs. We clarified that special event signs can be placed on or off-premise. Item 6, parking lot cross-access. When commercial tracks develop, particularly in a shopping center or a coordinated fashion, it makes sense that they have access, vehicular access between the 2 tracks. That means if I pull into McDonald's to get something to eat and I want to go to the dollar store next door, instead of turning back out on the highway, I can just go from one parking lot to the next. This cross-access standard in the ordinance, item 6, clarifies that and just basically says that if you have an adjoining parcel that's undeveloped or partially undeveloped, the county can require a connection between the 2 tracks. We were finding that sometimes it used to say just undeveloped, and you'd have a 100-acre piece of land with 1,000 feet of road frontage, but it had a house way on the back of it, so technically it's not undeveloped. So we tried to clarify that we can require cross-access between commercial parcels fronting on the highway. Item 7, connectivity. Same thing with connectivity. We clarified that when you have a subdivision come in, that the board can require that it connect or put a stub to the adjacent parcel. Again, that's building capacity for cars to move north, south, east, west without having to get on our highways, or as little as possible. Item 8 is a big picture. It's basically our connectivity index, so we use that to determine when connections are required, how subdivision streets are laid out. It's a pretty common feature of an ordinance, but our diagram was wrong. People are saying, well, your picture doesn't match your words, and that's not really a good thing, so we're making the picture match the words. Item 9, this is kind of one of those weird things that we found in our ordinance that didn't make any sense, quite frankly. We say that if you had an accessory structure, it couldn't be located in front of your house if your house was less than 300 feet from the street. Now, accessory structures are porches, garages, pools. So in a lot of neighborhoods, that makes sense because most folks put their storage shed in the backyard, but there are a lot of examples in Currituck County, particularly on waterfront parcels, when people look at fronts and backs differently than this ordinance does. So we were finding that like oceanfront parcels, a lot of times they look at kind of the water as their front and the road as the back. So we thought instead of telling people where to put accessory structures in terms of behind or in front of the house, just kind of let that be the way it's been. Go ahead.
I got to stop you on that because I did get an inquiry about the county is adopting, telling me that I can't have a swimming pool in my front yard. And so that goes right to what you're talking about is what do you call your front yard or your backyard? Because if you went in Corolla, there's swimming pools on front yards and backyards.
And the side.
So break that down in
So
plain English.
what I'm saying is we're removing that standard.
Yeah. It's like it was.
So we're not going to tell you where you can put your pool. If it meets the setbacks, you can put it in your front yard.
So
or your
we're
backyard.
removing.
We're removing it. Yes.
Okay.
We know that doesn't work. I'm sorry, I explained that too complicated, but basically, it hasn't been a problem in the past, and the standard's new, and it's become a problem. So we're getting rid of it.
Okay.
So that new boat that you're getting ready to buy, you can put in your front yard, and you don't have to put it back in the back.
Okay.
Yeah. Now you're right. A lot of covenants will take care of this in a lot of situations, but in uncovenanted neighborhoods, it's your decision as a property owner. Item 10. We've said that accessory uses are no more than 25% of the total square footage of the principal use. That makes a lot of sense in commercial applications, but it doesn't make any sense in residential applications. So we're saying strike that percentage for residential sites. Case in being, we're a rural community, and a lot of people have large horse barns or large garages or things that are much bigger than 25% of the size of their house. So we're saying strike that and just give residential properties a flexibility. Item 11. Oh, excuse me. Item 10 also strikes that reference to location I just spoke of. That was in two parts of the ordinance. Item 11, accessory dwelling units, and I want to take a second to talk about this because I think this is an important. We talk about affordable housing a lot of times. I think accessory dwelling units are actually probably a good way to provide affordable housing because it allows you to build a small structure that you can put a college kid in or elderly parent, whatever. You don't have to send them away somewhere. So I think it's a good standard, and I'll note that our accessory dwelling units are limited to 1,000 square feet in size. So you can't go build an accessory dwelling unit that's bigger than your actual house. So there are some controls, which makes sense. One thing we had in the ordinance is we said that the owner of the lot had to either reside in the main structure or the accessory dwelling unit. That was the way to make sure that you couldn't just rent both of those structures, just have basically a rental property with two rental units. That was struck down in case law. So in zoning, we can't legislate the ownership or if we can't make the owner stay on a property. So that's gone. So we don't have that anymore. But what I wanted to get the board to give some feedback on is right now the accessory dwelling units, if it's attached, if it's part of your house, then the staff can approve it administratively. If the accessory dwelling unit is detached, it's like an outbuilding or a granny flat or a garage apartment, it has to get a use permit. So it's got to come all the way to you guys to approve it. There's a lot of interest in the accessory dwelling units, but there's not a lot of interest in coming to the Board of Commissioners to get approval for it. So what the staff and the planning board has proposed to allow the detached accessory dwellings to be approved administratively. Remember, there's some size restrictions on it, but I wanted to make sure the board was aware of that, and that's in this packet. So and I'm going to keep going if there's no comments on that.
I'll just make a comment. That'll go along fine until somebody gets upset about somebody building an accessory unit.
Upside down.
And we can keep the use permit requirement if the board wants to. So
I'm okay with what you're saying. I'm just telling you it's going to, you just need to be prepared that somebody's not going to like it when it happens.
I think that holds true no matter what you do or how you do it.
As we learn every meeting.
Thank you.
Item 12, in our zoning districts, we set densities. And we base those densities on the land use plan, which makes a lot of sense because we're targeting densities where we've targeted growth areas. But we didn't actually include a density for rural areas or conservation areas. So we got to, like we just talked about, we got into some of these situations where we were in rural areas, we didn't really know what the density was. So we've just went in and took the land use plan density and specified that if you're doing a subdivision in a rural area, your density is 0.33 units per acre, which is back to the example of a 100-acre farm generates about 33 units. So that just clarifies. Item 13 does the same thing in a different part of the ordinance. Item 14, side setbacks. So in the agricultural district, there was a time when the side setback was 10 feet. Then we changed it to 15 feet. And then we changed it to say that if your house was built before 1989, it was 10. If it was after 89, it was 15. And then this new ordinance put it back to 15. We're saying just do it 10 feet and keep it simple and just let the agricultural side setback be 10 feet. I think that is consistent. Now I could argue that sometimes when you are in rural areas, bigger setbacks make things feel a little spread apart. But in terms of administration, it's probably easy just to pick a number. 10 seems to be the simplest. Item 15, ownership of open space. In the old ordinance, we said that if you set aside open space, that a farmer, a landowner, could continue to own that open space provided they used it consistent with what's allowed for open space. We'd like to add that back in. We think that if a farmer wanted to develop land and wanted to maintain ownership of a portion of that to continue farming, that we think that's an okay reason for an individual to own open space. And that kind of is in keeping with the rural character and things we're trying to go after. And the open space protects, so they can't pull a bait and switch on that. It gets recorded in plats and easements and things. Item 16, riparian buffers. So we've got wetland buffers, and it's 50 feet. And those are good because it helps protect water quality and kind of sets aside some land when there is runoff. It gets a chance to kind of filter out some of the pollutants and things. But what we were realizing is that it's tough sometimes when you've got a 50-foot buffer from a wetland or from a stream or something. So we've recommended a little flexibility in that when you set aside these 50-foot buffers, one is you can put them in open space and let the HOA maintain it. The other option would be that you could let the 50-foot buffer be on an individually owned lot, and then it goes under, it's still protected, but it's just not an open space. The advantage of that option is one is overall you probably decrease the maintenance burden of some of these buffers. You're letting some of this stuff be on an individual lot, which individuals maintain things better generally than associations do. And the second thing is quite frankly, you keep that buffer in the tax base too, because it remains on individual property. But again, when you lay it out, that would be an option you would have. And you would see that in preliminary plat for the buffers either in open space or on individual lots. Item 17, we're almost there. Item 17 is just cleaning up the definition of wetlands. There's basically three types of wetlands: camel wetlands, 404 wetlands, and 401 wetlands. We just clean that up to be consistent with what the state uses. And then finally, item 18 is something that I have discussed with some members of the Board of Commissioners, and it was an amendment to allow a pawn shop in the GB zoning district with a use permit. In the previous ordinance, we allowed pawn shops in the light industrial district and in the C, or the commercial district. Now, there wasn't much commercial district in the county in the old ordinance, but when the commercial district went away, we don't have that anymore. It got rolled into GB. The pawn shop use did not. So what number 18 would do would be allow somebody to apply for a use permit to put a pawn shop in the GB district. And that concludes my presentation, and I'll be happy to answer any questions.
Anyone have questions of Mr. Woody?
Item 18, make sure I understand this. A person wanted to put a pawn shop in Moyock in general business district. Their procedures are what, again?
They would have to apply for a special use permit.
From this board?
From this board. And staff was directed to add that item to this text amendment.
Staff was directed?
Staff was asked, yes. By one of the commissioners, by Mr. Martin.
I'm not going to debate pawn shops, but I have a problem with that one.
You didn't when I talked to you about a month ago.
Well, I tell you what, I've had phone calls since then, and I think it's, I have to listen when I get a phone call. That's it. So, I mean, you can call me out on it, but at the time I didn't, but I'm up here representing other people. So I have to do what those phone calls reflect.
Well, as far as I see it, that the connotation for pawn shops in the 30s and 40s, actually into the 50s, they were actually did most of the small loans that were taking place throughout America. Today we see pawn shops, and it's one of the higher-rated television programs that you see now on cable. But they serve a much different purpose. I know one pawn shop, the pawn shop over in Elizabeth City, actually sells most of the band equipment, musical instruments, etc. And they are a very viable business today. And I'm sure it'd just be something, another business added to Currituck County.
Well, I watch Pawn Stars and Hardcore Pawn. Hardcore Pawn is in Detroit. And if you want to see a site, you watch that. And I know the interest rates are in, what, 25, 30%?
Those are actually regulated by the state.
I know, but
Yeah.
I have a problem with it. I'd like to discuss that further, and it's based on phone calls that I've gotten, and they're not supporting pawn shops, especially in Moyock.
Well, I haven't had anyone talk to me about it one way or the other, Mr. Petrie. And I understand that, but I just, I see no problem at all. It's just another form of business, and I just, don't see the worry or the cause for anyone. For that matter, some people don't like Krispy Kreme donuts and everything because it adds to the fat in everyone's diet. Should we, do away with those? So I see everybody's got to care one way or the other.
Mr. Chairman, are we allowed to vote on everything? But I know people might have other concerns, but
A motion can exempt something and move it to go at another time for discussion. I think Ms. Gilbert has.
Mr. Chairman,
some-
I just want to make a comment in along the same lines as Mr. Martin. I've had phone calls in favor of having a pawn shop, and I was reluctant at first because of the pawn shops having firearms and things like that, because that was a big concern, and this all came about the time that Sandy Hook events happened, and he and I talked about that, and that was one of my biggest issues is pawn shops having the firearms. But with it going through a special use permit, I've had nothing but positive feedback on another business, and that's like I said, back in the 30s and 40s, pawn shops were not the accepted businesses, but nowadays it's a very lucrative and a very beneficial business.
Mr. Chairman, point of clarification.
Yes, sir.
Even if a pawn shop comes before us and they meet the criteria, we don't have a choice but to approve it.
That's typically how a special use permit works.
So if they meet this criteria that we've got here, whether we like pawn shops or not, voting yes or no is not an option. We have to approve it.
Or if you don't approve it and they appeal it to Superior Court, then a judge makes a decision, correct?
Well, yes, but you also had the opportunity in a special use permit proceeding to impose conditions that are reasonably related to the use of the property.
Right.
So you can provide for times of operation, days of operation, different type of requirements like that. So you do have some ability to add some conditions to restrict the operation, especially depending upon its location.
Mr. Chairman, I'd like to make a motion. I might go down in flames, but I'd like to make a motion to approve everything except item 18.
Hold on one second. I didn't open the public hearing, did I?
Oh, I'm sorry.
Let me open the public hearing. Is there anyone that wishes to speak on this item that did not sign up? Hearing none, I'll close the public hearing and defer to Mr. Petrie.
I would like to make a motion to approve PB 13-18 with the exception, move to approve PB 13-18 as presented due to its consistency with the 2006 land use plan, and that the request is reasonable and in the public interest. And I would like to scratch item 18 dealing with pawn shops until we have further review. I know that we discussed the gaming operation, and there was a lot of pushback on that, so that's my motion.
Got a motion from Mr. Petrie. Do we have a second?
I'll second that, just for the sake of discussion.
We have a second. Any further discussion? Hearing none, all those in favor, aye.
Aye.
Opposed?
No.
Aye.
How'd you?
I opposed it.
Opposed?
Opposed it.
Then
I have it
With-
going down 2 to 5.
2 to 5. With technology today, and this comes from the law enforcement, which I'm still active. Somebody steals something, they take it to a 2 to 5.
4 to 3.
Yeah.
Pass 4 to 3.
So it's adopted. correct?
No,
No,
it was
sir.
turned down. It was denied.
Okay, so
But
now
it-
there needs to be a substitute motion.
All right, I would make that, and I would like to approve PB 13-18, all 18 items to be included.
I second that
For
motion.
approval, second. Any further discussion? Hearing none, all those in favor, aye.
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 Opposed?
No?
No. So what does that vote? 5-2 or
passes 5-2.
4-3? Okay,
No, I said no. I voted with
Okay,
Butcher.
then it
Boss.
passes 4-3.
yeah.
okay. All right. Next item is Commissioner's report. No, next item is consent agenda.
Motion for approval.
Have a motion for
Second.
approval, second. Any discussion? Hearing none, all those in favor, aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Motion carries. Next item is Commissioner's report. Mr. Idlet?
I don't have a whole lot of anything this evening. Thank you, sir.
Mr. Petrie?
I'll pass, and thoughts and prayers for Washington Navy Yard.
Yes, yes.
Ms. Gilbert?
I do have a couple things. First of all, October 4th is the Chamber Golf Tournament. Make sure to mark your calendars on that to participate. October 5th, Bark in the Park. That's from 10 until 2:30. They are looking for volunteers to help with that event. If you'd like to come out and just lift to help move things around, to help with the judging, please contact Ginger Sykes. And lastly, I'd like to challenge my colleagues to an event that's happening on November 16th. Currituck Kids, which is a nonprofit that gives all of the money that is raised back to the children of Currituck County. The money does not go anywhere else but in Currituck County. And we are on a mission to raise $50,000 by 2015. And on November 16th, we're having a Gobbler Joggers 5K. There's included in that a 1 mile fun run. And then for those that say that I can't do a 5K or I can't do 1 mile, we've got the Gobblers Hobblers. So if you would like to participate in that event, you've got some time to meet me at the Y or meet me out at the community park and do a little walk-in, get your momentum up so that you can participate in the 5K. And if you're interested in that, you can sign up on www.active.com. And we've got sponsorships, and it should be a very fun day. They're expecting a very large crowd, and it's going to be an event with bibs, the whole 9 yards. So it is a program that's being presented with the Currituck Kids. So please come out and join us.
Mr. Chairman, I'd like to ask Marion to have Currituck Kids think about a donation to Backpack for Kids, because we're spending about $25,000 a year to feed these kids.
And that's certainly something that can be entertained.
Mr. McCord?
I got a few things I'd like to say, as well as a few people I'd like to recognize. Had the privilege to go to the high school football game Friday night. It's probably one of the largest turnouts I've seen in a long time. Johnny Wheeler, 4-0, Currituck. They played this Friday night at home. Play Wilson Hunt, which I think is a pretty good team, so probably going to be a pretty good challenge for them. He's done a great job. I'd also like to recognize some of the county departments. Parks and Rec is doing a program, and actually they do it on Monday nights. They did it last Monday at my golf course. And Larry Lynn from Spot Road, I don't know, I'm sure probably many of you know Mr. Lynn. He's been doing this program for 11 years out of his own pocket. He funds it, and Parks and Rec now is involved this year. I believe Corey Miller is in charge or assists him with it. But we had 31 junior golfers play last Monday at my place, no cost to the kids. Mr. Lynn provided some prizes and so forth. Tonight they played at the Carolina Club. I believe next Monday night they play at Kilmarlock. It's just promoting junior golf. Like I said, Currituck this year, the high school team made it to state, so people like Mr. Lynn, and he puts a lot of time into it and a lot of money out of his own pocket. And he didn't have a kid in it, doesn't have a grandkid in it, anything. He's a good citizen, and kudos to him. Another thing, I probably got about 60 phone calls, as well as other people did, reference to the pushy salesman through Moyock, Grandy, wherever, Currituck on the Sound, they were everywhere. It was a group coming out of Virginia. We had it last year. One of the deputies actually arrested somebody. I got a phone call. It was actually a family member of mine was the first one to press charges because the guy refused to get off her property. She told him about 5 times to get off her property. He was trying to sell her some kind of cleaning supplies, which when you buy it, it was soap and water, whatever. But Deputy Jesse Taylor arrested the guy, and, like I said, I had personally as a commissioner and a deputy probably about 60 phone calls about it. The guy was in my neighborhood at 8:30 at night, Brumsey Landing, walking around. I ran him out of there as well. So it's a problem we had all week. Dispatch probably had 40 phone calls on it. Sheriff's Department probably 50. Other county staff. Somebody even went in Sandra Hill's office and was complaining about it, I think, Monday. I had a lot of stuff. 9/11 was last week. It was a pretty pivotal time in 2001. I know there's everybody in this room or watching on TV can remember where they were at when that happened. I think a lot of times people just take things for granted and they forget. It was one time I think when everybody really came together, you kind of miss that. And I'd also like to commend, this one might be bad, the 7 people that are up here that do the job that we do, for the slack you get, the emails, the phone calls. I get a lot of those. And, based on the tax, I even got one from my own father. So based on the taxes, but it is what it is. We live in a great community. Our schools are awesome. The county staff does a great job. The Sheriff's Department, the EMS. I didn't sign up for this job, for power or definitely not for the money, but for the power or anything. To be a county commissioner, I signed up for it and ran, and nobody ran against me. I guess there was a reason, but I did it because I care about Currituck County, and I think people need to realize that. And like I said, just some of the it's just amazing of some of the statements and emails. And like you said, nobody wants to pay more. I know there's 7 of us up here. I know I'm paying more, and I think unanimously across the board, we all are paying more as well. So it's, but like I said, we live in a good place. If you live in Chesapeake, I guarantee you're going to pay a lot more if you live in Camden or anywhere else. So, it is what it is. Nobody wants to pay more. The hateful emails, the nasty telephone calls, stopping you at your mailbox or whatever. It is what it is. Pretty much that's it. Like Marion said, the golf tournament on the 4th for the chamber, and that's all. So I think I might have extended my time limit tonight, Mr. McCree. You didn't stop me, so.
Open mic for you.
There you go. I'm done.
Public
Yes.
service.
Thank you.
Open mic night.
There you
go.
Mr. O'Neill.
Well, just in
He
case.
commented about the football game. I went as well. The Schuster boys are bad. The team is good, but the Schuster boys are bad, I can tell you.
I tell you, they are. And the thing about the high school football team, there's a lot of kids in this county. I mean, there's a lot of good kids on that team. I know this from the law enforcement. They don't have criminal records. My son's a starting center. My other one ran through the banner with the Knights mascot costume on, so I had 2 of them on the field. But like he said, the Schuster boys, they had some phenomenal stats as well as some of the other ones. And, they just have a good group of kids.
One was quarterback. No one was,
So like I said, it was a crowd.
they scored all the points.
So, yeah, I think they did partake in pretty much every score.
Yeah, they did. Yeah.
Mr. Griggs.
Well, in case if Commissioner Kevin had went over his time, I yield my time to his. I have nothing further.
I appreciate that.
Mr. Martin.
My taxes went up too, folks, and we are all citizens of the county, and we try to provide as best we can for each and every one of you, as well as for ourselves and our families. Please know that. That is all.
Mr. Manager, I was approached this week with what seems like a pretty common sense thing that when we all were in driver's ed back years ago, they used to teach you slower traffic, keep right. I don't know if they teach that anymore, but I was in a conversation with someone from the lower end of Currituck, and they were venting their frustration with slower traffic does not keep right.
Road rage.
And that, would it be possible for the DOT to put signs up that said slower traffic? I have seen them somewhere. I can't remember. There is, but some signage that says slower traffic, keep right, that might alleviate some of the traffic.
New flashing signs that they've got up, the new.
Yeah, that's during the, that's right, during the busy weekends, maybe put slower traffic, keep right. So anyways, that was a suggestion from a citizen, and I thought I would bring it forward and see where it would go. And other than that, I'd like to reiterate about 9/11 last week. That's still something I know. I've heard a lot of older folks talk about where they were when President Kennedy was assassinated, and
Older folks, easy now.
seasoned folks. And, this is something that a whole nother generation will remember as long as they live, is where they were on September the 11th. So we need to remember the fighting men and women who are still deployed throughout various parts of this world, fighting for, hopefully, to keep us free. So, and their families, yes.
The day President Kennedy was assassinated, I was in Miss Moore's 5th grade class at Griggs Elementary School.
See? So I don't remember it, by the way. So, Mr. Manager, do you have any comments?
Right, thank you.
With that, do we have a motion to adjourn?
So move.
All in favor, aye.
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 Opposed, you can stay.